Welcome to the Heart for God podcast. With many years of experience pastoring and helping to start churches, Dr. Jim Townsley has some practical and biblical advice that can be a great help to you and your ministry. On this podcast, Dr. Townsley and other guests with special expertise cover a variety of topics. His goal is to help you lead your church to be a healthy, strong, and balanced ministry, and for your family to be happy, healthy, and living for the Lord.
Hey, thanks for joining us today in our Heart for God podcast. And I have with me a new friend that I found and an established missionary in Brazil. Carl, you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and a little bit about your family, because there's a lot of family, it seems like,
Yes,
that's here in Brazil.
Well, my parents came to Brazil almost 52 years ago. So I was born here as a missionary kid, grew up here. So this is home for me. And I remember that when I was a kid, I saw deaf people in one of the churches that we were in. And that was just something the Lord used to plant a seed in my heart. And I had no idea that many years later, he'd be coming back to Brazil to reach not only the hearing, but the deaf population also. So we've been back to Brazil. My wife and I, we met in Bible college and came back in July of 2001. So almost 25 years right now, and been involved in specifically reaching the deaf population through deaf churches in conjunction with hearing church plants.
So are the churches that are deaf, are they only deaf, or are they part of a hearing church where you speak audibly as well as the deaf?
Good question. So we don't have what you would call a typical interpreted deaf ministry where you just have one pastor and then the deaf meet in the auditorium where the preachings are all interpreted, and maybe you have a Sunday school class for the deaf. We actually have a deaf church where, you know, I'm the church planter, the pastor. We have 2 services a week, and the services are done in Brazilian Sign Language. So it's for the deaf people, but we wanted to be able to reach the whole family. And a lot of times children that grow up in deaf families don't really want to be in a service that is signed because they grow up in a hearing world, and so they're kind of a bicultural child as well. So they'd rather be in a hearing service, a Portuguese-speaking service, if you will. So our philosophy has been to start a deaf church within or side by side to a hearing church plant, if you will. And so while we have our deaf service on the same property, the hearing family members who don't want to sit in on the deaf service where it's done in sign language can be a part of the hearing church ministry. And then we share Sunday school classes. So all the children, both of the hearing families and the deaf families, are usually in the same classes. Nurseries are shared. But the deaf people have an identity. They have a pastor who understands them, who visits them, has their own discipleship programs. Whereas we're connected to a hearing church plant also. And we get to fellowship once a week. We meet together for one service a week where I do interpret that one. The deaf kind of get to feel a larger family experience, and the hearing church gets
Does that go along side by side with the hearing
It does.
service?
So we have 2 services simultaneously happening every Sunday morning.
But not
and every
in the
Wednesday
same
night.
room.
Not in the same room. We have our own deaf auditorium is what we call our space there.
And there's no Portuguese in the deaf service. It's all
So
signed.
what we do is we reverse interpret it. So there is a hearing person, and one of the interpreters will watch me signing, and they'll put it back into Portuguese, because we actually have a large audience watching on YouTube. And we started the YouTube channel back in the COVID days, and currently have over 3,000 subscribers. So
amazing,
if we don't put it into Portuguese, a lot of these people are learning sign language. They're not all deaf people watching it. So some people are learning sign language, and it helps them to have the Portuguese also spoken to match what's being said in sign
Now,
language.
can the Brazilian deaf, can they read Portuguese?
Most of them don't, unfortunately.
Wow.
The deaf people, what many people don't understand is that sign language is a language. It has its own grammar structure. It's not Portuguese put into signs. It's actually a language of its own. Portuguese becomes a second language for the deaf. And so because they don't have good schooling opportunities, they struggle with reading. Most of them don't even learn how to read well at all. So that's a challenge we have, because the Bible in Portuguese is a written Bible. And so most of them can't even read the Bible well. So one of our projects is actually putting the Bible into sign language so that can help them, in addition to encouraging them to learn the written Portuguese language, but also at least to have the Bible signed into the sign language, and so they can watch those, and it helps them understand the scriptures.
So is the Brazilian Sign Language based upon the American Sign Language?
Not at all.
No.
They're completely different languages. Many countries around the world have their own sign language. Languages are based on people groups and experiences, shared culture and whatnot. And so American Sign Language, which what we use in the States, ASL, is completely different than the Brazilian Sign Language, which we call Libras. And so, in fact, we're coming up on our Deaf Church's 10th anniversary, and we have invited a deaf pastor from the United States to be our keynote speaker. So he'll be preaching in American Sign Language, ASL, and I'll be interpreting into Brazilian Sign Language because the deaf won't understand them. It's 90% different.
Wow. I'd never even thought about that, yeah. Now, it seems like Brother Gary Tyler, they had a deaf ministry when they were in Lumeda, and it was during the service, I think.
Right. So that's a typical interpreted ministry. So Brother Gary, he's the main pastor, so he knows Portuguese. He doesn't know sign language well. So his wife, and they had a few people in the church who learned sign language, and so they would interpret the services. And that's a typical interpreted ministry. Obviously, it's better than no ministry at all.
Sure.
Now, if you can have a full deaf church where, and especially working alongside with a hearing church where the deaf can actually be preached to in their language, there's a lot more spiritual growth opportunities in that.
Yeah. Well, I guess the work in Bolivia, I guess that's all just sign language.
There is a work there also. And there's work in Peru like that. There's a few, not too many. Just imagine yourself if you were visiting or moving to a foreign country and you had to sit in a service. I've seen in America some Hispanic ministries where the Spanish people will sit in the back and they'll have an earbud where somebody will be translating all those services. But if that's what you had to listen to every service, it kind of gets tiring because it's secondhand information and everything's being passed from one language to another, and cultural differences also. So the deaf people feel the same when a service is interpreted. It's secondhand information, and it's never always put into their language properly, and they lose out on some of their culture or experiences with that.
Okay, wow, I never even thought about all that. That's interesting. And the missionaries that are in Brazil, how many have a deaf ministry, would you say?
Well, very few actually. So Gary and Pam Tyler have, and Pam, she, as I call her Aunt Pam, she interprets for the deaf there in their church, and I believe they have a Sunday school class where she teaches them. So I'm not sure how many deaf they have going there. And I know that we started a deaf church in Goiânia, which is about 12 hours away from São Paulo, and that's been turned over to a national. And then after 7 years, another American missionary, a deaf missionary, came and took over that work. So he's helping regrow that deaf church there. And then our deaf church, where we currently are, there is Stephen Barrett is another missionary who has a passion and desire to reach the deaf. So they're getting ready to start a deaf work. I'm not exactly sure what phase they're at right at the moment. But other than that, I don't know if there are any other interpreted ministries or deaf churches within our mission board, at least.
So of Brazil, if your name is Barrett or Johnson, it seems like that covers half the missionaries.
Yes, sir. Just about.
Yeah. So you're third generation?
Actually, second.
Second generation.
Right. My brother, Brian, has a son already on the field, so he's third generation, and another nephew coming back soon also. So there are some third generation Johnsons and Barretts as well.
Yeah. Well, that's a great testimony, though, that to grow up in that environment for the first generation and to see your children happy and feel satisfied to carry that on, I mean, that to me speaks volumes.
Yes, sir. My parents always showed us how serving the Lord is an enjoyable experience. They were always happy. They never complained. And we grew up knowing that it's fun serving the Lord. And I'm just thankful for their example, their faithfulness.
Yeah, so I've enjoyed being here. We've been here this week. And so all these missionaries come together. And the first thing I noticed is such joyous camaraderie. I mean, people are really happy to see one another, and I think it's very encouraging to have a conference like this.
It is. And growing up in Brazil, I have attended these conferences all my life. So it was our family get together once a year, and that's why we call all the other uncles and aunts, because they're family. And so now, as I've come back as a missionary, the younger ones call me Uncle Carl, and we continue the family culture.
Wow. So what is the population of Brazil?
Brazil has about 210 million people.
And the size of it, it's got to be almost as large as the United States, I would think, the mainland of the United States.
It's larger than the mainland
It's
United
larger
States.
than the mainland.
Right. Brazil takes up right about 50% of the South American landmass and population.
Wow.
Within Brazil, we have nearly 10 million deaf people also.
It's overwhelming. You think, what can I do? But you do something, and, you can make a difference in somebody's life who just need more laborers, more workers.
Yes, sir. We're nobody, but God's willing to use nobody. Well, okay, if you can use me, then I'm willing to let him use me.
Well, that is great. Well, I've enjoyed being here, and I thank you for taking a little bit of time to explain some of that to people. I think they'll be interested in that.
Well, it's been a joy to get to know you, and an honor to be a part of your podcast.
Wonderful. God bless you. Thanks for listening today.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, consider sharing it with a friend. You can also follow at Dr. Townsley on Twitter or on Facebook at Jim Townsley.